Well, hello, and thank you for joining me for another Alex on Tech and ITY TV interview. I'm joined today by Dean Vaughan. He's the new Asia Pacific Vice President of Azul. Welcome to the program.
Thanks, Alex. Super happy to be here.
Thanks for taking the time. Now, Dean, for those who want a refresher on Azul, what does the company do and why is it unique?
Okay, so basically, all we do is Java. So that's, I think, the most important thing that I would like everybody to remember after watching this video is that all we do is Java. And you say, okay, well, that's great. What do you mean, right? So, at the moment, around 27% of the Forbes 100 run our Java. 12% of the Global 1000 run our Java. Of the trading firms, pretty much 100% of our trading firms run our Java. And just overall, from the overall top end of town for financial services and organizations like that are all running our Java. So why are they doing that? And there's three reasons why. Number one, cloud costs. Organizations, as they shift further and further to the cloud, are looking for ways in which they can dramatically reduce their cloud costs. So cloud cost is the first reason. The second area that we address is performance. So, I mentioned about the trading apps, right? Mm-hmm. So trading apps, high performance applications need a lot of uptime, need stability, and need to be fast. So our customers gravitate towards applications that need high performance Java-based apps. And then the final area is really, an alternative to the current custodian of Java, right? We're seeing more and more customers now. I'll talk a little bit in a second about, what Gartner's seeing and other analyst firms. There's definitely a dramatic shift away from the traditional custodian of Java towards third-party applications or third-party providers, sorry.
Sure, yeah. And obviously that custodian is Oracle, who most people would presumably think of when they think of Java. But Azul's been working with Java for over 20 years, and you even lead more open JDK projects than Oracle or any other company. And obviously, Azul is stating that it's an exciting time for Java. So, what more can you tell us before we get on to some of the other topics?
Right. Well, that's a great question. There's a shift happening, and it's not just me. Firstly, I'm certainly seeing this in the market when I'm talking to enterprises, when I'm talking to service providers, financial institutions, and education institutions. The list goes on. I'm hearing about customers looking for alternatives when it comes to their Java. But it's not just me, right? I mentioned Gartner. There's a great Gartner report on our website, and I do encourage everyone to download it. It's called Choosing Java Runtime. Now, what Gartner is saying, these are Gartner's words, not mine. Customers are inspired, Gartner's words, to look for alternatives. They're using, dauntingly expensive from the current Java, our current competitor. So their words, not mine. And what we're seeing now is organizations look to move away because of these reasons. And to give you some numbers and put some data around it, Gartner actually think that by, I think it's 2025, 70% of our Java applications will be running on alternate third-party vendors, technology such as Azuls. But it's not just, it's the shift's happening a lot faster than that. There's they quote a survey they did by Performer. Performer surveyed 900 of their customers. Of the 900 customers, already 59% of them that number has dropped from 70 to 59% of their survey customers are running now on Oracle Java for production environments. But it gets better. There's a Synex survey from another company where they did a survey of 2,000 Java developers, and those Java developers quoted that only 23% of their users are now still running on Oracle. So the shift off the incumbent Java towards third-party organizations is happening. It's happening fast. And it's happening, as I said, for two reasons, primarily for cost and secondary for performance.
Yeah, well, people love to have their choice.
They do. And, that's one of the great things about free market. It's another thing, a great thing about open source, right? The open source community, the development, the features, everything that goes into open source technologies ensures that organizations do have the ability to be able to have choice. And that choice is what really, creates a good environment and creates the competition and creates the opportunity for companies like Azul to be in business.
Yeah. Now, Azul talks about the cloud paradox. So what is this paradox and how does Azul handle it? And what are the cost savings of using Azul instead of Oracle?
Right. So there's I talk about shift in market, right? I spoke just before about the shift with regards from customers looking to shift away from the current, incumbent Java provider to alternatives that are in the market. The other area that is really exciting is the development around Java. I mean, Java's been, around for 30 years or so. Azul's been in business for 20 years, supporting and enhancing and really developing Java for growth. But let's face it, 30 years ago, the cloud didn't exist, right? It could have been on a science fiction movie, right, 30 years ago. Now it's commonplace. And as a result of that, Java needs to be developed and transformed so that it can enhance this new cloud environment. I mean, I was watching some of your other videos and some of the guests were talking about, cloud transformation and digital transformation. And let's face it, customers are transforming their infrastructure, their applications for the cloud, their network for the cloud. Everything's changing. But Java really, for many years, stayed consistent, the same. Now, though, with so much adoption of the cloud and shift for Java to the cloud, now organizations such as ourselves are recognizing that there's a big gap here, right? And there's a gap that needs to be plugged, and that gap can only be plugged by development and performance. So we talk about, one of the big areas with the cloud is the cloud paradox. So this paradox is, in simple terms, customers are looking for all of the improved performance that the cloud gives you, elasticity, agility, all of that great stuff. But also they want it, but they don't want the costs that come with it. So the paradox is, how do I get the performance from my Java applications in the cloud that I'm looking for, whilst at the same time not blow my expenditures out, my costs out? And, it's once again, it's not just me and Azul saying this. There's an independent analyst firm called Vanguard, and Vanguard did a survey of their customers that are using Java and the cloud, and they cited that at the moment, initially, their customers have identified two main priorities. One is 50% of those customers are focused on getting the performance out of their workloads on the cloud, but also 50% of them are trying to drive their costs down. And their costs are coming from three different areas. All three of them said the same. So 22% of them said they've shifted to the cloud so fast, they've got this rapid scaling. It's just happened so fast. They're scaling, and all of a sudden, those costs are now being blown out. Governance, it's moved so fast, they don't have any processes, any governance in place to be able to control those cost blowouts, right? So governance is a big issue. And then over provisioning of cloud resources. So, let's face it, the cloud it just makes life so easy, right? You provision a new, from the click of a mouse, you provision a new workload, you've got another new workload, you automate it as, if you're a customer that has a web-based application and you have a huge amount of transactions come through, you automate that, you provision more and more workloads to be able to address that particular elasticity, that peak in traffic, right? But all of this has a cost associated to it. So the paradox is really, how do you ensure you get all of the benefits of your Java workloads in the cloud without blowing away the cost? Now, the way we do this is simple. It's the performance. We have a couple of features. We're doing features such as we're shifting the logic controller off the processing, and we're moving that to our own cloud processing. We have other features such as we handle the garbage collection process very efficiently. The garbage collection ensures that the performance of the application runs so much faster. And the other area is what we call Ready Now. And what Ready Now is this concept of we look at each of the replicating Java workloads and we see what efficiencies of those workloads are there, and how can we ensure that if that same process is being repeated, can we cache it? Can we remove that process so it's not being replicated over and over and over again? Now, what those three areas translate to for the customer is reduced compute. You can run the same environment in your cloud without the requirement of so much compute. So you get the same performance of multiple VMs that you would be running in the cloud. You get that performance with much less compute. What does that translate to? A much lower bill from your cloud provider, right? And so these are features that Azul is adding to our JDK, our Java. And only Azul is adding, right? And these are features that are designed specifically for this new paradigm, this new world we're in, which is the cloud. And the features really do enhance and cut costs. In fact, we estimate that the savings in the cloud that a customer can provide is up to 50% over what they would initially be providing. So back to your original question, which is, what's the paradox? Well, the paradox is, how do I get all this elasticity for my Java environment? But how do I do it whilst not blowing out my
margin?
My costs? Yeah, margin, just the bill, and time and time again, when I speak to customers about, I'm talking to them, they say, "What's your cloud provider? Where are you Azul? Are you AWS? They're the main two, or where are you moving workloads to?" That they'll tell me it's not one or the other; it's a combination of both, right? So they're not even getting economies of scale, and that leads me to my final point. So how are customers addressing this problem? Well, they're going to the kind of the original model and 101, right? Oh, let's go to AWS and Azul and let's try and negotiate a better price. Okay. So right now they're having to send their Office 365 to Azul and they're having to send other applications to AWS, right? So they're not even getting economies of scale. So their ability to even negotiate a lower price is strained. They're thinking about traditional ways of trying to get their price down. And what they're not thinking about is, hey, you know what? I can redesign my Java infrastructure. I can look at alternate Java providers and alternate Java technologies that are out there and see through the infrastructure, can I redesign my environment and significantly reduce my costs? Because there's only so much you can beat the vendor up to get their price down, right?
Mm.
But if you reinvent the wheel and think a little outside the box and think about a different way of doing it, i.e. looking at the JVM, right? Talking to Azul, we have some pretty neat ways in which we can help you get that cost down.
And to switch from one Java environment to another, I mean, Java was always famously write once and run anywhere. I mean, is that switch over pretty much seamless? Is there how long does it take to go from one Oracle Java implementation to Azul's implementation? What's the timeline?
Right. Okay. So obviously with the Oracle, our product for that solution is called Core, and it all comes from the same main line, right? So it really is, in many respects, a drop and replace. We do recommend that you do testing and ensure, we're the vendor, right? And so, every customer, I'm a big believer in testing and going through that due diligence process. Certainly from my side as a vendor, I'll always ask my team, has the customer done the testing, right? Because if they haven't done the testing, then that buying journey they're on hasn't yet completed in my mind, right? So I'm a big believer in testing, But really, for the core product, it is very, very much a drop and replace, right? And there are a couple of little changes that we put in place, but the reality is it's not that difficult. And we have plenty of customers throughout Asia and Australia that have, and some significantly large financial institutions that have, and education institutions in Australia that have, pretty much shifted all their workloads off our major competitor over to us without problem, without issue. And I was just meeting a bank. I met one of the major banks up here in Singapore only just yesterday, and they said that they're now up to 60% of their workloads, and they're in the thousands and thousands of VMs. 60% of their workloads have moved across, and they not a problem. They were very happy. And hadn't seen an issue, hadn't needed to log an SR. In fact, very complimentary of our support organization. So it's not that difficult to be able to do it. With our higher level product, the optimization product, that technology is called Prime. And the Prime has a lot of features built into it. So that product, there is a testing process that you need to go through. There is obviously, it's not, even though we take it from the open source, right, we do a lot of enhancements to it. So we have a very rigorous pilot process that we go through with the customer to ensure that environment gets up and running, and ensure that the technology does what we say it will do. And most importantly, what customers are looking for through that process is that they actually do see the performance improvements that we were talking about, right? So, but once again, we have multiple large, so actually, let me take a step back. At the beginning of the conversation, I spoke about, 100% of the trading firms, financial trading firms, highly mission critical environments, financial transactions, stock exchange, options trading, lots and lots of money here involved, mission critical. If this goes down, it's a problem. And they're running Prime. It's Prime, it's Azul Prime that is giving them those performance improvements that are enabling them to be able to significantly improve their Java transactions. So to answer your question, like any, I'm not going to sit there and say, hey, it's super easy, and it's like any IT implementation, needs to be thoroughly tested, needs to be thoroughly put through, and the transition needs to be planned through. But our track record of customers speaks for itself, and we're not getting called up and asked to come back in and or any problems like that, right? So I think the customers speak for themselves. And the type, sorry, let me take one final point. The type of customer speaks for itself. If a financial options, stock exchange, trading firm is happy with the technology, it works.
I'm pretty sure when I went to your homepage, there were some sort of customers or case studies listed, and there were some big names there. So are there any that aren't sort of commercial in confidence that you would just want to mention briefly?
Oh, sure. I mean, I can mention, organizations such as Salesforce and Workday. Big, Credit Suisse is there, BMW, LG. I mean, it's the top end of town. We're not referring to small organizations here. And like I said at the beginning of the conversation, right? I think it was 27% of the Fortune 500, correct me if I'm wrong, go back to exactly what the number was, of the value brands, I think it was up to about 50%, and 100% of the trading. So it's definitely, our customer base is tier one organizations, and really organizations where it truly is mission critical. They just can't afford to have their environment go down. They need that performance, they need that speed, that agility. And Workday, Salesforce. I'll give you some other indications as well. Most of you, I'm sure, are now watching television over streaming services. So just think of a lot of the major streaming vendors, one in particular. The whole thing runs on our Java. Globally, Mastercard is another example. Every time you put a Mastercard transaction through, if you're in Australia and you are trading shares and options, I won't mention where, but through that process, our Java Prime is deployed. and it's our Java Prime that's making those transactions happen for you. So it's it really is the prevalence of our technology through the globe, through all of the tier one type organizations is extensive. You know, a number of the major banks and financial institutions throughout Asia Pacific and Australia have already adopted Prime as their main technology, particularly for their trading room and their products where they need that very, very fast transactions.
Yeah. Now, as the new Asia Pacific Vice President, now what attracted you to Azul, and what are your near-term plans?
Okay, so the main thing that you know, I'm actually quite glad you asked me this question, because it made me stop and really reflect as to why I joined Azul. And it's very clear to me through my career, I've always enjoyed working for the game changer, the organization that is reinventing the wheel, challenging the status quo, saying, hey, hold on a second, there's a better way to do this, right? And when I, you know, if you look at me on LinkedIn, you sort of see the history. Even for the larger organizations that I've worked for, I've always been in the startup challenger product. I've never been in the core business of that institution. I've always been in the challenger product being built up. And the reason I like that is that I like the whole concept of thinking outside the box. I like the whole concept of challenging. And so for me, when I first started to do my research on Azul, and started to understand exactly what they were doing, why they were doing it, and how they were doing it, it really resonated, firstly, just internally, but more importantly, knowing what I know about Java. And I agree with Scott Sellers, our CEO. I agree completely with him. You know, there's, you know, for a long period of time, Java's just moved along happily, right? And what Azul is doing is Azul is saying, hey, now hold on a second. We can really innovate this technology. We can really take Java to the next level, particularly really enhance it for the cloud and really enhance it for cloud environments. So for me, the attraction was, hey, I want to be a part of this, right? I really can see the value of re-engineering Java for the cloud. And I can really see the value of, you know, changing the game. And so, yeah, that's, and like I said, this isn't the first time I've done it. This would be the third time in my career where I've deliberately chosen to work for the challenger. Yeah, it's fun. That's the place to be. That's, you know, that's what attracted me.
And do you want to briefly tell us about your journey through the world of tech, your history?
Oh, sure. So the first thing I'll say with regards to IT and technology, right, is that the lesson I've learned through my entire career is, if anyone younger is watching this, go with the industry, follow the technology. You may have a view of the world where you see yourself in 10 or 20 years doing a certain job or working in a certain technology. In IT, forget it, throw that thinking out the window, because the reality is where you end up, what you end up doing and what you start doing are two very, you know, I see this all the time with people who in my team and myself. So, you know, I started in communications, in comms, right? I was putting networks together throughout Australia back in the days with, you know, MPLS and Cisco and that's where I started. Then I moved over into more into comms, then into software infrastructure, and then I found this thing called open source, and I thought, wow, you know, the whole concept of open source really intrigued me. The fact that so many different organizations could get together and collaborate together, not just institutions from around the world, institutions from competitors, and all work together for a common purpose, a common good. You know, that says a lot about our industry and humanity overall, right? That there is hope. And so I was really attracted to open source. So now, from putting networks together, I shifted into software infrastructure, and now I'm operating system and open source technology, very, very different areas of the industry that I started in. And so that's my, I think, from a reflection, if you're sitting here and you're young and you're just starting in IT, go where the opportunity is, and don't constrain yourself and limit yourself based on what you think you might want to do, because I guarantee you, where you start and where you end up will be two very different places.
Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you see Azul growing over the next couple of years?
Right. I mean, not just me. I just refer back to what Gartner's saying, right? The growth and the potential for the shift that they're already seeing from their customers when customers are speaking to them off the incumbent Java technology to third-party technologies and innovative technologies is exciting. From it, so I'll answer this into two parts for you. The first is technically. The growth for Azul that I see, I'm really excited about the way in which we are adopting the cloud, right? I'm really excited about not just the innovations with regards to cost saving in the cloud that I spoke about with the cloud paradox, but just to be able to start to leverage the cloud to provide greater features and levels of service to our customers. So one example of this is Intelligence Cloud. So we have a product that you can read up on it on our website, where I give you the example. I was just speaking to this very large financial institution yesterday, and he was explaining that he has thousands and thousands of JVMs that he's running, and he doesn't have visibility of them. He's struggling to understand which versions he's got. He doesn't know which patches, so he's not sure of the security level of the patch. And he knows he's got vulnerabilities, but he doesn't know where they are. And he was desperate to try and get some greater visibility of his environment. And so, of course, we said, hey, let us tell you about, Intelligent Cloud. And so obviously we're moving to a POC. But he was, the way he was explaining to me, it was just a very good example of the challenges that organizations face, where their Java environments are growing fast, and if it's in the cloud, it's growing even faster, and sometimes they're not even aware how fast it's growing. And getting visibility, being able to report on it, being able to understand, getting that intelligence on what's actually happening in their environment. So I'm very excited about the growth in leveraging the cloud to be able to provide greater features inside our own technologies. And then, the other, as I mentioned earlier, which is the whole concept of taking the JIT controller just in time, taking that and shifting that processing to the cloud to then free up, more compute. So from a technology point of view, very excited about the growth and the features and where we're taking the product. From a Asia Pacific and Australia point of view, we're absolutely investing. So, I've been recruiting, I'm hiring, if anyone's interested, I'm hiring all through APJ because of the demand. So our current plan is to double down and continue to invest in Australia. You're certainly going to see more expansion, more resources, more investment in Australia. Certainly here in ASEAN and China and Northern Asia continue to expand. And also, I don't know sort of how far your view, I guess it'll be global. So looking very, very much at expanding into some other major countries here across APJ, countries that are very open source friendly, have large Java environments and big financial markets. So there's expansion across the board, and it's not, what gives me the ability to expand like this is the venture investment that Azul is receiving. I mean, we are receiving significant investment for expansion because not just ourselves, not just the analysts, the venture capital companies too can certainly see the value that Azul is providing and the growth.
And just to look into the crystal ball even further, any thoughts on how Azul will help shape the industrial, business, and consumer metaverses and those of your customers in the 2030s?
Yeah, good. That's a good. Is certainly a crystal ball. My my thinking on that was back to what I just said, right? Which is that the cloud has really changed the world, and I think that the future of cloud technology, not just the traditional infrastructure, but the fact that a lot of the information, all the apps, etc., are inside a centralized location. The more that happens, the more organizations like ourselves can open the door for newer innovations. And I know I'm repeating myself a little bit here, but when you look at how now we're starting to leverage the cloud with Intelligence Cloud and with the JIT controller in the cloud, and how we're starting to take more and more processing out of the customer environment and start to do that processing, that features and that compute ourselves, we can build economies of scale, we can build features. We also get intelligence, right? We get the cloud. One of the things that I'm sure isn't lost on your viewers is that the AI, right? The fact that you're now through the cloud getting visibility into so many customer environments, you're getting real-time data as to what's happening, and that then gives you the ability to make better decisions, better deployment. You understand what some of the customer pain points are a lot better, and you've got real metric data to be able to help you in your roadmap and development of the product, right? So I certainly feel that's a big area. The final point, when you said metaverse, right, where I'd like to expand on. One of the big areas where, I mentioned earlier trading apps, right? So if you think about it, what does a trading app have? It has a buyer and a seller. In gaming, we're winning a lot of business, and we're talking to a lot of gaming vendors because, my son loves Formula One on the Xbox, right? And he likes to race other players. He switches on the Xbox, and then you get the little spinning wheel finding other races, right? Because it's much better to race against a human than a person. So we're doing a lot of work with some of the gaming vendors, because it's just like a trading app. It's getting a buyer and seller. It's getting gamer A, gamer B, gamer C, and the speed, Prime, our Prime product, all of those features I spoke to you about transfer directly to the game. So I don't know. I'm no expert on metaverse, and I don't want to sort of overstep my boundaries here, but looking at what we're doing for the gaming companies today, and thinking about where the metaverse is going and what that future could look like, who knows? Who knows what possibilities? But certainly today, we're already helping gamers digitally connect to each other real time with the gaming companies.
Now, I'd just like to shift gears as we get towards the end of the interview. Just ask if you could please share a memory of your first computer.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I'll probably regret this, but the first thing that comes to my mind is my school computer. I'm showing my age as well. The other reason I mentioned this is I was talking to some old school friends the other day about this. At school, IT was really in its infantry when I was at school, and we had a little Mac computer, and we had to schedule time as students. So now my school obviously has a huge, your kids are taking laptops and iPads. It's part of the everyday, schooling that they're doing. I'd like my kids to spend less time, but they are constantly, IT is just a part of what they do.
Mm.
But my first memory was fighting against my other students for, an hour's worth of time on the Mac. I can't remember the name of the computer, the type, but it was one of the old Mac, and just green screen. Because we were just fascinated by it. So that was certainly my first foray into IT and computers.
Yeah. And do you remember the first time that you encountered Java?
Oh, I do actually. So, yeah, interesting story here. I was working very closely in a previous life with Sun, and it was all around the time when Sun was deciding should they, keep it proprietary or should they make it open source, and what should they do? And that actually opened me up to I didn't really understand open source back then. I didn't understand the concept. I didn't understand how it all worked. And as you probably sense from this video, I'm a big open source advocate. And what Java did was educate me on the value of the community, right, and the value of everyone contributing. And also the whole idea, back to what I said earlier about my industry and changing the game and taking on and moving challenging. If you look at open source history is really, at least my understanding of it, is comes from, look at Linux taking on Microsoft, right? That's where, so this is a good example where the industry or the ourselves as participants in the industry recognize there's a gap and work together to plug that gap and change the game. And that's what, in a lot of ways, a lot of the open source projects are all about. And then collaborate together to create an even better product and a better technology, right? So Java introduced me to open source. Otherwise, I wouldn't have really, I don't think I would have understood or had exposure to it the way I did. And thanks to being involved, we were in Australia, we weren't involved in decision making or anything like that, but we were certainly involved in transitioning to a more open source model with Java.
So my second last question is to ask if you could please share some of the best advice you've received in life to help you get where you are today.
Great question. I love this. Okay, great question. So I have two, if you don't mind.
Please. That's why I asked about some of the best advice, because usually some people have said, well, I got a couple of pieces. Can I please share? And it's like, yes, please do.
So these two I live by, and anyone who knows me who'll be watching this video will certainly probably chuckle to themselves. So the first is there's a saying which is never make a decision till you have to make a decision, right? And that was I forget, Russell somebody, actually Randy Push was his name. He is a computer science lecturer in the United States. Wrote a number of books on leadership and decision making, and back in the 60s and 70s, and he coined the saying, never make a decision till you have to make a decision. And that concept is often, if you don't make the decision, the solution works itself out. Or you mightn't have the right answer at that particular point in time, so don't make the decision, the right answer will present itself. And I live by that in both my personal life and work life, is that I only ever make decisions when I absolutely have to. That's number one. And the other, this is one of my favorite sayings as well, is Barack Obama's quote. He's quoted this, never let perfection be the enemy of the good. And I think that today, and I see this a lot, right, where people hold off because, I don't know, that project plan isn't completely perfect, or the deployment plan, or the education material, or the training material, where, and really, if it's 80% of something is better than 100% of nothing, which is another way to say it, right? Which is this idea that it's better just to get the product out and the technology out, or the training out, so that people can start to educate and use it, and then the result is that they get the benefits of that.
And you are refining it as you're going along.
Yeah, exactly. And also, by the way, how many times do you find, I'm sure you find, I certainly find, where you release it and somebody kind of reads it and goes, oh, you know what, actually, if you tweak it here, it's even better. And you're like,
yeah,
wow, that's a great idea, right?
It's the crowdsourcing of ideas and feedback.
Exactly. So for me, like I said, never let perfection. Barack Obama was using it in a different way. He was talking about, trying to get a bill through the US government when he quoted it. And his goal was to, it wasn't everything he wanted in the bill, but it was still good enough. It improved people's lives, right? So I just feel that's something that I live by. If my team is watching this, they'll certainly chuckle to themselves because they hear it from me a lot.
Sure. So what is your final message to ITWire viewers and readers, and to your current and future customers and partners?
Thanks for that question. So in summary, right, if for everyone watching the video, there really is three things that I would like them to walk away from, and remember this. So number one, when they're thinking about Java, anything Java, that there are now options, right? There is now an alternative, a very, very solid alternative, and an alternative that and I encourage them to explore it. Go to our website. Don't take my word for it. Go download the Gartner paper, download the Vanguard paper, Google, do your research. If you'd like to speak to some of our existing customers, we can certainly arrange that, right? So in the past, I think, one of the biggest challenges has been that people are just, they're not aware, right? And so there's now an alternative, number one. Number two is that, the cloud paradox, right? It's this idea that as more and more organizations are moving to the cloud, that there are ways in which you can rethink reducing your cloud costs. And so don't go normally to, hey, I'm going to try and negotiate a contract lower, or whatever the traditional ways in which you've gone about it. Actually think a little out of the box here and take a look at your JVM and think, what, maybe I can redesign it. Maybe I can bring in a new supplier and significantly reduce my cloud costs, right? So that's number two. And number three is just that, as I mentioned earlier, with regards to there are alternatives out there, right? Which is that alternatives to other vendors, and we can significantly, as I said, up to about 70%, reduce your existing infrastructure costs with the current Java support contract. So there are three things.
Well, Dean Vaughan, the new Asia Pacific Vice President of Azul, thank you very much for your time. I wish you the best of success in the role, and I hope we get to talk again in the future.
Thank you, Alex. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.